will be done by Ber Kessels and Morten, King of Denmark, about teaming.
Yeah.
So it's done? Yeah. So hello everyone. My name is Ber Kessels and I'm going to tell something about theming in Drupal. Theming, what you can do with it, and I also want to go a little bit deeper into the changes in Drupal 6 with regards to theming. So first of all, I'd like to explain something about the basics of Drupal theming. Then I'd like to point out something which is often a big problem in professional workflows. The theming of Drupal, actually the designing your Drupal site, is a big problem because you have to tackle it in a kind of different way than traditional designing workflows work. And at last I want to point out some parts in Drupal 6 which is new and better and improved with regard to theming. Drupal's theming works with the principle of overrides, which actually means Drupal outputs something for you, the modules output something for you. That's the way the developer of the module or the developer of that specific function thought it would look best. On your side, you can always override that part. That's basically how you design your whole Drupal site. You take what's there, you alter it, and you get what you want. So you have default, outputted by some module or by core. You theme it, and you have your version. Basically, it's very simple. It's actually very object-oriented. Even though it's not technically object-oriented, it's the way of thinking, the way you have to theme is OO, which makes it very powerful. The other part is that a theme in Drupal is not just a little bit of colors and little funny images. It's the whole part where you tweak your look and feel. What a theme is it's an engine. And an engine is basically the language in which you're going to process your themes. Smarty can be a language. PHP template, I'll come back on that later. X template, there are loads of them famous templating engines. You can all use them on Drupal, which is really nice as well. Then on top of that you have a template. Like when you have you use Smarty as an engine, then you build a Smarty template on top of that. And on top of that, you put your CSS files. What the cool thing is that your CSS files can actually make completely new themes. So, say you have a red version of Fosdem, besides the blue version of the Fosdem site. All you need to do is just add one specifically named CSS file, and you have a completely new theme available. On the subject of engines, some of the ones which are already done for Drupal 6 is the PHP template, and the Smarty is on its way. For Drupal 5, the Smarty has been around. PHP template, I'll get back on that later. And X template was in a kind of beta status all along. I think it's kind of abandoned at the moment. But if there is someone who wants to take it up, there is room for it in Drupal, because Drupal you can use any engine for theming. So you don't have to, when you're in a company who already is famous with, familiar with Smarty, you don't have to learn a completely new templating engine. You can just continue using Smarty and all the tools which you have built around your Smarty environment. But also, if you have something else, if you build something your own in your company or in your own workflow, you can use anything you want as a templating engine. Okay, something about PHP template. This is what we use by default in Drupal. It's used on, I think, like 90% of the themes around. People often say, don't get PHP in my design area. Don't get PHP. But PHP is a templating engine. PHP is actually not built for making content management systems, because PHP has always been a templating engine. They actually turned a templating engine into a complete full-blown programming language. But so it's not scary to put PHP in your design. I'll give an example here. What you have is a little bit of an if. It's really simple logic. Why I put that if here is that when I don't have a title, don't want to print an empty H2 header. But actually, there's a lot of PHP in here, but it's not scary business logic PHP. It's just a way to print and to detect some variables. Yeah, that about the PHP part of it. A theme in Drupal is, in contrary to a lot of other famous CMSs, is more than a little bit of colors here and some shiny CSS effects. It's actually the way you build your whole look and feel of your site. And the feel is a very big part of it. You can do a lot through modules. By plugging in modules, you get a lot of extra features. But the way these features act and the way they look and place they are actually is, that's all handled in the Drupal themes. Which makes Drupal theming really complex, but also very, very powerful. Because you can actually change the whole look of your site in such a way that no one will ever recognize a Drupal site from it. Okay, I can show you some little examples. This is basically a Drupal.org site. It's a pretty basic site with some blocks, a little bit of colors. But without much, without a lot of tweaking, without actually having to tweak the core, without having to build loads and loads of modules for it. The Donna, it's a Belgian radio station, just released a new Drupal site. I'm not sure if it's really seeable, it's a little bit small, but well, when you go and look at this site, you'll notice that they did a lot of funny detailed things, like they replace all the titles with images. I think they built some engine behind that actually, so that they can use their own fonts for it. But also you can see that there's not this traditional 3-column, 2-column blocks on the side look. They have a lot of Flash embedded, JavaScript stuff. I don't know what else, just to show you how powerful and how much you can tweak Drupal without having to touch its core and without having to really dive into the moduling. You can just do this on the templating level. Another one, a famous one, is the Onion. They have a more block look, but because they're very, very aimed on blocks, they can do a lot of tweaking on the templating engine as well. They don't have the traditional, here is the content, there is the block look. They have more of like, we print all kind of stuff. And it's all also done on the templating side. The way all this interacts and the way all this looks and is positioned. So basically, to get down, the whole idea of Drupal templating is that you do so many tweaking inside here that the whole workflow within a process is often very difficult to do, because you cannot build a Drupal theme without having a site. But you also don't have a site until you have your Drupal theme done. So it's kind of a catch-22 in that. And there it is. Without a site, you don't have a theme. And without a theme, you don't have a site. But often you know that there's a designer there, he makes a nice Photoshop file, he'll throw it over the wall, and then developers can continue with that and make some CSS out of this. But in Drupal, that's kind of hard to achieve that way, because the designer who is building the Photoshop file, he actually needs to know how things are going to interact. But the ones who want to know how things interact actually need to know how the Photoshop file is going to look, how the site is going to look and feel. So, back one slide. The best way to achieve this is nothing is leading. Get all people together in a room and let them work on it in rounds, in circles. So you don't, like, you say that's the design department, once they're finished, then it goes to the development department. The best thing is to get them all together and to play ping pong, to just iteratively design your site. But if you start early with theming, like very early in the process, you'll have to redo a lot of theming along the way, because once some module is finished, you'll have a lot of new functionality which also needs to be designed. Actually, there might actually be functionality which is going to be removed, or functionality which just changes the look of something a little bit. In that case, you have to redo all that part of the theme. However, if you start at the end with theming, like we first built the whole functionality and at the end we're going to theme a little bit, then you have to redo a lot of module work, because in the theming layer you're actually going to do a lot of field, not only the loop, but a lot of field stuff as well. So you'll have to redo a lot of the module work. You probably end up like, oh, it wasn't that handy that I passed that variable in that and that function, because then the themer wasn't able to work with it. So I have to rebuild my whole module again. So you have the wall, the brick wall with the designers and the developers, and the other side is the ping-ponging. And I found that in a lot of larger projects, the ping-pong one is really the one you want to take. Okay. There's a lot of stuff in Drupal theming for Drupal 6. I don't know how many here have worked with Drupal 5 theming, but let's say you all have. So Drupal 6 has a lot of improvements over Drupal 5 theming. Most of them you can actually find the details on this page. You can write it down or look it up. It's pretty obvious on Drupal.org where to find it. Gabber, the ones who were here before, already touched it a little bit, some of my points, but I'll just try to get a little bit deeper into them then. Nowadays you can use info files for Drupal, which basically means that, like with the module, you add an info file. The info file contains the information about the file, which dependencies it has, what modules belong to it, what's the name, the version, etc. Nowadays themes can do that as well, which is a great improvement, because you can actually, that's really cool, you can build a theme with a supporting module, a helper module, where you put all your logic in that module. You can finally put your logic where it really belongs, in a module which belongs to the theme, and you can create a dependency, and when you install the theme, your module will need to be installed as well. We have a lot more .tpl.php files. Gabor also showed some of them. What used to be in Drupal is that the theming parts were spread all over the code. So you really have to dive into the code and do a grep or a regular expression on certain function namings. Nowadays you can just go into the folder where the module lives and you can see all the HTML which is going to be generated by that module. You can actually just copy that part to your theme, adjust it, and you're done. Which makes the process a lot easier for developers who don't want to get into the PHP coding, but just want to know, okay, how can I tweak this little part, how can I put a class there, or how can I put an extra div around something, just basically copying, oh, there's the code, put a div around it, ready. Still, there's one thing, a lot of stuff has improved in Drupal 6. There's a lot of more consistency, which is very nice, because those who already work with Drupal theming know that you often have a function which gets a string, next function which you would think it should act exactly the same, gets an array, and then your theme blows up because you were just programming, there wasn't a string, so this is going to be a string as well. It's not the case. You really have to dive into it, often have to print variables on your screen in order to see how is it going to act. One thing which is helping a lot is the better documentation which we have now in the functions. You can actually see all the stuff which is going to go in and which comes out. But still, the stuff which goes in and which goes out is pretty inconsistent throughout different theme files. It's getting there. It's really, Drupal 6 is a huge step forward in this. It's really good. But still, there's work to do there. And also, Dries pointed it out. One of his target points was better internal APIs. I'd like to put on that. This is part of getting better internal APIs. If you want the consistency get in, what Drupal 6 does is it does a lot of more rendering via structures. Pretty complex to say, but what it does actually is, instead of passing sometimes an array and sometimes an object, and then again it gets 3 strings, what it does is it gets a standard Drupal kind of structure. It's an array with nested items in it which interact with the way, which also tell you the way they want to look. So basically you get an array which says I'm a username and I want to be rendered, or I am already rendered on this page. things like that. That's where Drupal 6 is heading. Heading a lot more than 5. Drupal 6 has this for notes, for the articles. Previously, the articles, when you would render them, they would just come in as a huge blob of already pre-rendered HTML. Nowadays, they come in with all the fields nicely structured, telling them how the fields look, if they're already printed on the screen, so that you don't have to look for whether they are printed or not. And another cool thing is that you can just at the end print, like say, print everything which I haven't already printed somewhere in a box or on a page or an image. Just print it there so that I don't forget any content when a module adds content. Yeah. So I was saying, yeah, it's not yet there. Also, because it was really nice that Dries pointed this out as being one of the targets for Drupal 7, better internal APIs. I'd say whenever someone feels like getting more structure and better consistency into this Drupal theming, you're welcome. So that was my introductory talk. I leave the word to Morten now.
Yeah. Desktop. Okay.
Like to have a reverb?
Oh.
Just get back to your slide.
Oh wait. Stop now? No. Now?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. What I'm going to talk about is a slightly more complex matter than Ber was talking about. Is actually one of the things that we do as themers, a lot of the time we do it, is getting some kind of, we get a job from a client. The client wants some kind of design for a different page. And what we actually have to do is getting the, from the back-end perspective, we have to have an administrator who has to work with the site. And we have the front-end designers, people like me or Ber or somebody like you, who wants to have some kind of different theme on it. And as the designers almost wanted to do is having a very specific way of doing stuff. They want the pictures at a specific site. They want every point on the site have very specific setup. So what I'm actually having here is this is a layout for actually the Danish Drupal site, Danish user group. And what we have here at the top of the site is actually just one node, one simple node. Well, I'm coming into how we go to that. But the thought is that we have three top fields. Each is three different nodes that we want to put into the front page. And want the administrators to fairly easy to change these elements. And we can do that in a lot of different ways in Drupal. We could use the views module to do that. We could use custom PHP calls using the node loader or something like that. But what we really wanted to do here is making a way that the administrators could very easily change the pages, and I as a themer could be very sure that it wouldn't break my theme in the node. So what we actually got here is three different nodes that is included inside another node through the CCK module. We'll come to that in a moment. But each of these pictures have a specific size, and the text has a specific length. And actually, the HTML of these three top nodes is very different from what else we're going to have. Art is actually my new bulldog, so I thought you should see that. This is more or less the whole node for it. What the CCK node does, I don't know if everybody's using CCK and know what CCK is, but what it does actually is giving us some fields that we can import other nodes into it. And that can be really, really powerful, especially if you want to make say make a specific front page, and you want to make sure of a lot of static blocks to put in. So what I'm doing here is actually just importing 3 different nodes into my node that we still can use as separate nodes. So what we're going to do before we create this site, this page is create a new CCK node type. We're using a node reference module that comes with the CCK, and what it actually, then we're going to use the PHP template engine, the variables, using the hook there to create these specific template files we have to put in. So instead of using just the node GPL file every time we have to import a node, we actually can use any kind of node template we want to use in that specific design. So, but when we're showing that node that we have imported, then we're using its normal node types. We actually suddenly now have 2 different node GPL files for one node. And the beauty of it is that we, as the normal themes go along, because we can still just work with a normal node pages, node GPLs. But at the moment that we want to import it in a specific node, we can use the templates we want. So what we're just doing is I've created a very simple little node, the title, center area, left area, and the right area, and a body. There's nothing much to it, just adding them. What's interesting here is that when we're showing the node out to the pocket, to the page, we want to set the state of the node to the full node, so that we take all the data from the node and put it out, so we can now theme every little detail that we have inside that node. So what actually an administrator would do in the site is to put in the different areas you want to. You can actually just use the power of Drupal instead. So now I, as the backend designer or the theme or the administrator of the site, can give the power out to any moderator, and he can just work with it. And we don't have to have we just use the simple Drupal way of doing this stuff. We don't do any custom stuff for it. And that was actually one of the reasons I ended up with the solution, was that I first tried to build this with the Panel 2 module, and there's a very high learning curve for a new administrator and moderator to do that. But this instead is so simple that you almost want to cry. So my basic node is, what I'm actually doing is I'm dropping, this is my main node for the page. What I'm doing, I'm dropping the content. The content variable is not of interest here. And I'm printing it out as separate fields. So what this line does, the print line, is actually say, well, give me the node, give me the field left area, give me that area field, and give me the view of that. We do that for 3 of them. Instead of fumbling around with your node and print out $node, you can actually just go into the CCK manage field and look into the name of it. That is what you have to hit. We're going to the templates PHP now, because we got the node out, but we want to control now each different node GPL we have to put in. So what PHP template variables does is actually, before we get into all the content out to our pages, it's run through that, and we can use the hook to kind of pick up at the moments we want to modify. So what I do here is say, well, if we've got a node that's showing, then check up on the vars, on the node, the reference in fields and field name. The field name is left field area. If that's true, use this template file. So what Drupal does now is actually using a different template file when we're rendering this kind of node. And we're doing that for 3 different files. So now I have a node dash area dash left dash center. Actually dash center again. Let's screw it my slides. And what template files does is actually giving you a bunch of different templates you can work with. You can actually put in an area set and do a lot more really advanced stuff. Get really confused about it. One thing you should think about when doing this is actually keep your sense with it, because something gets very complicated. So what we got now is actually 4 different nodes, GPLs for one page. We've got node GPL that shows the whole node. We've got the area, 3 different areas we're putting in, and we can also have a specific. If I would call my node MBK, that's my initials, almost my initials. I could also use that as the type. So if it was type foo, it was like node-foo. So we actually would have 5 different nodes for showing this simple node. The HTML for these 3 different areas, I've simplified it a bit. What we're actually doing here is using the image cache module to modify each different image that we can call through the node layer. But again, what I do is I'm ignoring the normal $content variable, and I'm printing out it as a single field to get maximum level of control. When we come back to the GPL, to the graph, you see it a bit more. But what we're actually doing here is the first one is just giving the image, giving the body. The next one here is I actually want the image placed in my HTML over my title, and then give it the body. And then again, a second one with the title up, we would normally do it. So what we actually have now is 3 different node areas that's being loaded into our template, and still having it inside a simple node. So what you will say here is this is the, as I figured it out, was the easiest way to use the power of a simple Drupal theming engine, and with a little bit of treating, 10 lines of code through the PHP template variables, we actually have a way to do very complex websites or web pages just by using the node module and the CCK module. So we don't have to take up moderators out and learning new stuff. If they know basic Drupal things, we can actually do more or less what we want with it. That was actually that.
Yeah.
So, should we say that as always? Yeah, you can clap. Oh, do we have any time left?
Oh, you still have 20 minutes.
I have 20 minutes.
You still have, if you want to get.
Oh, Jesus.
Jesus.
I don't know if do we have any?
Some questions?
Yeah, questions.
Nicely documented this for us somewhere.
What?
Have you nicely documented the work that you did?
Not on this slide. The slides are going on my website here later today. But what I'm actually going to do is try to write this up with a bunch of other things that I'm doing in Fosdem, a presentation of actually trying to get some logic into the way you can do your theming work, because it's like it's also a very individual thing you do. I normally came from a design background, so I'm very focused on some other levels that maybe the PHP coders would focus on another level. And I work in a certain way, I don't know, Tobias working on another way. And one of the great things about Drupal is that we can actually work in that way we want to. We don't have to do it as somebody says to do it.
You mentioned that you chose to do the node reference
Yeah.
thing for usability,
Yeah.
the admins, instead of using panels.
Yeah.
Was there another reason why you chose that instead of?
Well, actually one of them, the panels 2 module that we use for it is one of the things that the only way we could actually tell as a single area like this one, that, hey, this left area should go in every time we added a node to the views. We had to identify that with the string that the administrator had to type in. And one thing I've learned over the years is you should never give your moderators that amount of power or give them that responsibility. Give them a thing to click on instead. So that was actually why we got perhaps to, after about 20 or 30 hours of work with that. So, and this took about 5. So that's one of the normal things.
So if you use the one content type for one node?
It's a one content type, but it's actually 4 nodes. The whole point about the CTK node reference is that we have the content type that can get other fields into it, like a title or an author or a place or something like that, an image or another file. But we can also add other nodes into that node. That we have
for a page.
What?
So one content type for a page.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so when the editor is they edit the page and they do not create new nodes.
If they just edit that page, it's not going to be a new node. It's going to be the same node. Yeah. Anybody else? I think we're done.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.